if I wanted to springboard off of where we were, I would stop by saying that some things in my life have to die through disciplines. That's the works of the flesh. Other things I have to discipline myself to walk and work into my life. If you would look at verse 25 of chapter 5 as exercise, I mean, if any of you have ever gone through an exercise regimen where you built exercise into your life, verse 24 would be more like diet, and verse 25 would be more like exercise. Diet's about what you're not getting, okay? In my life, diet's about what I can't eat. But in verse 25, exercise is about what I should be adding to my life. And in a very real sense, the works of the flesh are really about dieting them out. Here's what I learned. I don't eat ice cream, hardly eat ice cream at all. When I was a kid, I had a milk intolerance, and I didn't know that, and I ended up sick a lot of the time, and I couldn't figure out why I was sick all the time. And once I figured out that when I didn't eat ice cream on an empty stomach, I didn't get sick, I found out that I just finally naturally said, I'm not going to eat ice cream. And for a long time, my wife would bring it out, and I'd look at it longingly and just say, no, I better not do this. I'm going to really feel badly. And you know what I found out? After a while, you actually can change your taste so that it no longer bothers you. She can sit there and have a pile of ice cream if she doesn't, but she could. And I'd be okay with that. I can go to an ice cream store and watch you all get ice cream and not get ice cream and not feel cheated. That happened because I just disciplined it out of my life. And it's not like evil, but I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know you could actually become okay with it. Now, here's what I can tell you. That same thing works in every area of discipline of your life. The first day you start exercise, it's actually not the first day, it's the third day of exercise that's a killer. The first day you're energetic because it's a new thing in your life. The second day you're kind of going, okay. The third day you're like dead, okay? That's why they say do every other day, which drags it on to the sixth day you're dead. But the point is, when you add it into your life, after a while, it's several weeks or months, depends upon how much exercise you're doing, it becomes a part of you. And then you start to be able to do it every day. When it first happens, you're like, oh my goodness, I can't do this. But then you get stronger. The same is true of the disciplines of walking with the Spirit. And when I say disciplines, that sounds so like negative. It's not. There's a lot of delight in walking through my life in peace, but do you know how much effort it takes to be at peace? Here's how not to be at peace. Spend an hour reading enraging things on Facebook. Guess what you won't be? You won't be at peace. So I deliberately block out of my life people that are going to constantly enrage me. So if I'm going to walk daily in peace, I'm going to have to say, you don't get to be in my life with your panic button today, because I need to walk in peace. There are 5 different kinds of people in chapter 6. I want you to spot the 5 kinds of people in chapter 6, okay? The 5 kinds of people are weak brothers, and they're at the beginning. Brethren, if anyone is caught in any trespass. Now, this is a guy who's writing who is very skilled in the law. This isn't just a word he selected. Hey, I'll just use the word trespass. This isn't the guy who's caught in sin. What's the difference between a sin and a trespass? Or let me try it another way. What's the difference between chata'ah and osham? Try again. No, chata'ah can be intentional or unintentional.
Was a trespass misusing something that was holy?
There you go. A trespass technically is a subset of sin whereby someone uses that which is holy in an unholy manner. Okay? So he says, if anyone's caught in a trespass, you who are spiritual, restore such a one in a spirit of gentleness, each one looking to yourself so that you too will not be tempted. This weaker believer is someone who's caught up in using that which God has separated for holy purposes in an unholy way, and it's apparently a temptation to others, so you help them, but you help them carefully. Okay? Now the test case for that was what? Sexuality. But it's not the only case, but that was the test case. It sounds to me like the person who is on track with God, goes into the life, leans into the life of the person who's wandered and says, let me help you get out of this, but has to be very careful they don't fall in it. Okay? So, the first one is weak brothers. And one of the things that happens is, well, I don't know how to... This is what I would call dealing with the caught. People caught in sin. And in chapter 6, verse 1, the person, anyone who is caught in a sin, when somebody is ensnared in a sin, I want you to see it as that. There's too many words here, and I know what it is I'm trying to say, I just can't find the right way to say it. The person who's your brother who's caught in sin is not your enemy. They're in a trap. They're stuck in a trap. And you need to see them as a person who's entrapped by an enemy. They're not the enemy. They're entrapped by the enemy. So you have to help them spring the trap and get them out of it. To do that, you're going to have to stop and pay attention to them and pay attention to what the trap is. So I want you to picture this literal person who's stuck in a bear trap. You're going to have to evaluate, that's my friend, they're in a bear trap, I got to figure out how to spring this trap. But while you're springing the trap, please be careful that you don't end up in the trap. Because then there's two people in the trap, and that's not helping anybody, right? So he gives them the instruction, and he says, wise is the man or woman of God who recognizes how fragile our own faithfulness is. Be careful. You're never going to get somebody out of a trap while you're judging them. If your spirit is judgmental, you're not helping them. You're keeping them where they are. Now, you have to judge that what they're doing is wrong, but not be judgmental. How do you do that? Tell me what that looks like. Let's say you know a friend. Okay, you have a friend, and confidentially, you know they're sleeping with their boyfriend, girlfriend, whoever. And they're your really good friend. They've been confidential about this, and they're kind of going to you and going, you're my friend, and I don't feel right about this, but I really feel right about the relationship, and what do? How can you help release them from the trap without A, falling into the trap, and without B, creating a sense of judgment that makes it impossible for them to come out of the trap? What do? Be practical. Don't quote verses at me. Oh, you wanted to quote verses at me. What do?
I was more thinking desperate prayer.
Okay, desperate prayer's a lot. Andrea, that's not a bad line. That's a good starting place. Because when you do that, you're acknowledging, I don't have the ability to release somebody from... This is a spiritual thing, not just a physical one. This is very much a spiritual thing. What's at the heart of that sin? You know your friend. What's at the heart of it?
Unhappiness with God's plan?
Certainly unhappiness with God's plan because I'm doing something other than God's plan. But what else? For some people it is, but for most people, what I found, especially among my friends, was they weren't sure they could hang on to the other person any other way. Most often it was that. This deep insecurity that if I don't do this other person isn't going to stay. Now, as their friend, what's the first thing I'm thinking? Maybe they shouldn't. If they don't appreciate you the way I appreciate you, maybe they shouldn't be there, But that's not the whole ball game, because that never works. You say that to your friend. Does anybody think that's going to work? They're going to look at you and go, yeah, but I love them, Then you step back and you go, wait a minute, part of the trap here is exaltation of feeling. You actually think that because you feel this, that therefore is necessary to your life. It's not. Let me say it this way. Until you can figure out what the trap is, you can't help them out of it. The trap isn't sex. That's not the trap. It's how they got there. It's what they're doing there. Not what they're doing, but what they're doing there, why they're there. So you got to figure that out before you can open it up. You got a friend who comes to you and they're constantly falling back into a past life situation, and you got to ask them. You got to get to the place where you're asking yourself what is driving them back there. If you don't attack the lie, you won't get to the sin. That's the problem. So here he says, first of all, I want you to notice a couple things. First of all, this is distinct work. It opens with brethren. This is not about unbelievers. Guys, listen to me. It is not your job to go get unbelievers to stop sinning. Do not waste time on this. For some reason, my generation has wasted a lot of good firepower on trying to get lost people to stop sinning. It's dumb. It doesn't do anything. So, brethren, distinct. I want you to think this is nothing about believers and unbelievers. The second thing I want you to notice is the work, it has to be very determined. Both the violator, the one in the trespass, and you, which are spiritual, must admit there's a problem. If the person doesn't want you meddling in their sin, then don't. You have got to get them to the place where they're willing to go along with. You can't reform somebody who doesn't want to be reformed. You can't throw them into like sin intervention. Dun, 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 Come on, that's not going to work. By the way, the work has to be very deliberate. What is the goal of the work? What word in that sentence is the goal? Restore. The point, the purpose is to help get them back on track in their walk with Jesus. It is not to make your ministry sound cooler. It is not to make you look better. It is to get them back on track with Jesus. Now, I have to be careful because it's easy to gracelessly confront somebody about sin when they're wrong because we're annoyed, not because they're ensnared. Be careful that you're not mentioning to them they're a sin because you're annoyed at them. Like, I can't believe you're doing that. That's really going to drive it home. The other thing I would say is that this is a work that is very delicate. In the spirit of gentleness, it says. Did you notice that the spirit and the work here was gentle, meekness? It was strength under control. So there has to be that aspect to it. The other thing is that this is a dangerous piece of work. Where do I get danger? Warning, warning. What is it? The last part of the verse. So it's a very dangerous thing. Now, the first verse then is I am dealing specifically with a person who's caught. The second verse is I am dealing with the deceived. This is a different person. The deceived. There are people in life who believe they are self-sufficient because they are Christians and they are taught to be the pioneer Christian. Pioneers, we do it by ourselves. Verse 2 says, bear one another's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ. For if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. This is the person who honestly thinks that they are walking around taking care of themselves, they are self-sufficient, and do not grow to recognize their responsibility of involving other people. They say, I can grow in the Lord by myself, and I don't need the body, and I, by the way, just met one of these Sunday. I had a guy looking right at me going, I don't need to go to church. I don't need to be a part, the guy's a believer. I don't need to be a part of anybody else. I can learn what I need from the Spirit of God and the Word of God in my own living room. And I said, you are deceived. And I want to show you the verse that says you are deceived. And I said, anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. If you think you can pull this off alone, then the first half of that says, bear one another's burdens and thereby fulfill the law of Christ, you are not bearing anyone's burdens in your own living room. You're not. You are deciding that you don't think you need, so you don't think you'll give. And here's what I'm going to tell you. Persecution comes and you're going to need the rest of us. Trouble comes to this country so that they turn on us hard, and you're going to need the rest of us. You can't fire enough bullets to keep yourself running all the way around the house to defend yourself. You're going to need the rest of us. Okay, take a look at this one. Now, In dealing with the deceived, what does he say? First of all, there's a plan involved here. Did you notice that believers are called to share the load when it comes to being unable to carry things themselves? So let me give you an example of where God does this intentionally. God may drop into our church certain, we call them extra grace required, EGRs. Okay? Certain people that just make you insane. Time with them, a day with them is like 1,000 years. Do you have people like that in your life? Do you know people that you go away from an hour and you think you've been there a week? Don't point to your roommate. That's just not kind. Oh, I thought you were pointing to her under the table. I said, there's a sense in which we get to the place where some of us think we can walk through life and kind of carry ourselves and do what we want. But the truth is, God's going to drop into our lives some people that need extra grace. And that's going to cause the rest of the body to have to form around them because no one person is going to be able to deal with them. All I'm saying is that there are people that their boundary isn't that they're extra grace required. Their boundary is they think they're doing it so well, they don't think they need anyone. So God drops into the group people that are so needy that other people have to obey this to get used to doing it. Let me suggest it another way. Sometimes God will take the spouse of someone to heaven and leave us with a widow because it's good for the church to need to take care of somebody. It's not just good for them to be taken care of. We need people to take care of. Otherwise, what happens is if everybody's self-sufficient, nobody's engaged with one another. When a need comes, it's a gift of God. God gifts the church with needy people that we have to help to get us to do what we're supposed to be doing. I want you to see that there's a prescription here. The work is prescribed. It's a matter of obedience. I want you to note the phrase law of Christ. Fulfill the law of Christ, particularly because it reveals somebody who has a self-deception. And the whole point here is that there's a rule Jesus gives us, and that is to care for one another. And we don't fulfill that while we're all at home doing our own thing. So there's a deceived believer. Okay, now there's a third person that I have to deal with, and this is in verses 4 and 5. This is dealing with myself. Paul charged Galatian believers to self-examination. I want you to look at verse 4. He says, each one should examine himself. So this is the third person. Now I'm dealing with myself. Okay? Let each person examine his own work, and then he will have reason for boasting in regard to himself alone and not in regard to another, for each shall bear his own load. How is verse 5 not directly contradictory of verse 2? Okay, yeah, that's one way to go with it, Andrea.
You're taking responsibility for it?
Yeah, verse 5 is like, you take responsibility for yourself and don't try to leave anything for anybody else. Verse 2 is keep looking for people that you're going to help who got more than they can handle. And really, if everybody does verse 5, nobody will be in verse 2. But everybody's not going to do verse 5, and some people are going to be in verse 2. Does that make sense? There will always be people who can't handle life. Why? Because not everybody's as strong as you are. And honestly, there are some young believers who don't know even how to do it. And one problem comes in their life and they're ready to panic. I love that pilots go through training that has to do nothing with piloting the plane. It has only to do with psychological ability to handle stress. Because what you don't want to do is go, we're all going to die! That's not really going to help. When you're heading for a mountain, what you need to do is steer the plane, not scream. Screaming probably will only make the journey into the mountain more loud. So what you want to do is be really careful. Now, there's an old theologian called Albert Barnes, and he wrote something in the 19th century about verses 4 and 5. This is what he wrote, and I thought this was good. He said, "The man who forms an improper estimate of his own character will be sure to be disappointed. The man who examines himself and who forms no extravagant expectation in regard to what is due to himself will be appropriately rewarded and will be happy." He says, compare this with Proverbs 14. A good man shall be satisfied from himself. Proverbs 14:14. A good man shall be satisfied from himself. The sentiment is, his conscience will approve of what he's doing in evidence of the favor of God. In other words, when you're doing right and you know you're doing right, you won't need people running around telling you you're doing right. You'll be okay with just doing right. Now, guys, I will tell you, when you first start ministering in whatever it is, I don't care if it's children's ministry, youth ministry, it doesn't make any difference to me what it is, when you're up there, worship ministry, whatever. When you first start ministering, you will have an inordinate hunger to be affirmed by other people. You must break out of that fast. You cannot live off of the affirmation of other people. If you need to be affirmed, you need to stop ministering until you don't need to be affirmed. Okay? Because the thing is, there is a place for affirmation, and you need to get it, but it needs to come from the Lord. So my ride home on Sunday is usually alone. That's my talk with God. How'd I do? That point number 3 I thought was really good on paper, but it died in front of me. I lost half of them on that. The half that wasn't sleeping, the other half was wandering. I have these conversations with the Lord. He will tell, people will stand at the back door and tell me I did a great job, and Jesus will say, no, you didn't. And that's okay. You need to get it from Him. Now, let's go on to the next one. How about dealing with my believing family? Dealing with my believing family. This is verses 6 through 10. And I get that specifically from verse 10 that ends with household of the faith, okay? This is what he says. The one who is taught the word is to share all good things with the one who teaches him. Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. For whatever a man sows, this he will also reap. By the way, we all use this verse, but look at the context of it. The context is giving to the person who teaches you. That's the context. But you never hear it in that context. For the one who sows to his own flesh will from the flesh reap corruption. And the one who sows to the Spirit will from the Spirit reap eternal life. Now let's stop there and ask ourselves, what did he just say? You know the old adage about the 2 dogs fighting. Which one's going to win? The one that's been fed more. Okay, in your life, there is a spirit wrestling against the flesh. Which is going to win? Whichever you feed more. I want you to understand something about the flesh in your life. The more you feed it, the stronger it becomes. You do not fill it up and then it asks for no more. You feed it and then it gets stronger and asks for more. The more you sin, the more you'll want to. The more you feed the flesh, the more you'll want to. The stronger its urges will become. They do not get satiated, they get stronger. That seems counterproductive. You just think, boy, if I could just do it and get it over with, then I'll be okay. It doesn't work that way. If you just do it and get it over with, you'll want to do it more. Even though you feel terrible about doing it. This is the funny part about the flesh. You feel absolutely awful and can't wait to do it again. It's the way we are. So you need to grapple with the truth of that. Now, what I think is funny here is he goes on and says in verse, well, not funny, but unusual here is verse 9. He says, let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary. So then, while we have the opportunity, let us do good to all people, and especially to those who are of the household of faith. Paul made it clear that believers who are growing were to share all good things. But he said, listen, all good things isn't just money, it's a host of other encouragements as well. The other thing he says is, in the middle of the point about sharing good things, he reminded the Galatians of a truth that believers can't forget. You reap what you sow. If you don't like what you're reaping, you got to change what you're sowing. Because if you keep putting corn in the field, you're going to keep getting corn back. If you hate corn, I suggest you stop planting it. And if you keep getting back lust, stop planting it. You're going to have to change what you're looking at. You're going to have to change what you're thinking about. And the best way I know to do that is fill up your life with other stuff. Honestly, that's been the only strategy that's ever worked for me. Fill up your life with other... the thing is, if you're so busy doing what you're supposed to be doing, you won't have time to be doing what you're not supposed to be doing. And idleness is no friend to a disciplined life. It is not. The more time off you have, the more you will go off course. So lock your day down. Start off with a plan in your day and then stick to your plan. It doesn't have to be, I've got to drag myself through the plan and be disciplined. Life is easier if you just say, you know what, if I sleep till I want to, I'm going to be tired and groggy half the morning. So I'm going to get up, I'm going to run, then I'm going to come back, I'm going to get a shower, have breakfast, I'm going to get my day started, I'm going to get on the front side of the day. Life goes better on the front side. The back of the wave is not where the fun is. It's on the front side of the wave. I know I'm talking to a group of people that are part of a generation that honestly thinks they can sleep half the day away and still be productive. It's really not true. Good things happen in the morning. I know it's going to be hard for some of you to believe, but good things happen in the morning. Get on the front side of the day. Can you tell I have kids your age? At any rate, let's go on to the next group, dealing with agitators. Dealing with agitators. Now, who are the agitators among us? Don't point to anybody. That's not what I was asking you. Go down to verse 11. See with what large letters I am writing to you with my own hand. Those who desire to make a good showing in the flesh try to compel you to be circumcised simply so that they will not be persecuted for the cross of Christ. Now, I'm not going to drag you deeply back into chapter 2 and chapter 3. I think you understand the argument already. But here's what he's saying. Some of these guys just don't want their friends picking on them, so they're running around telling you to keep the law. That's really what their whole gig is. They're agitating with you because they're trying to make it better for them. He said, for those who are circumcised do not even keep the law themselves, but they desire to have you circumcised so that they may boast in the flesh. They'd like to walk around saying, yeah, that was me, I took care of that. Do any of you have a friend who is so desperate to be affirmed, they make you want to gag? Like, please love me. They're like puppies. I mean, you just want to go, will you stop? And the thing is, it's very hard to deal with people who are falling all over themselves to get recognized and to get loved. If you find within yourself a reaction, here's what I generally try to do. I try to give them what I think they need. I will walk up and say, what you did was really good in that area, and I really appreciated it. Then when they turn on me, now, look, there's an appropriate level of me helping, and then there's an inappropriate level. Okay, I'm not here to be like running around telling you you're good at everything. If you need people like that, go hire some. They're really good to have. But I'm not one of them. But I do want you to know that you're loved and cared for. That needs to be in balance. Go to the end of the passage. He says, verse 14, but may it never be that I would boast except in the cross of our Lord Jesus Christ, through which the world has been crucified to me and I to the world. Can somebody tell me, in the phrase at the end of verse 14, through which the world has been crucified to me and I to the world, what does that mean? The man's walking around. He's not dead. So what does it mean? How is he using the word crucified? Yeah, it's the most cruel form of execution possible. And as you try to fight with the flesh in your life and allow the Spirit to emerge victorious in your life, some things are going to have to die a nasty death. Some desires are going to have to die a nasty death. And I realize that some of this is a reflection of the current diet I'm on, but that's just how it feels. You're going to have to look at some buffets and go, get thee behind me, Satan. You're just going to have to do that. And I mean it in the best possible way. Everybody's going to go to that movie and everybody's going to tell you about it, and you're going to know you can't go. Why? Because your eyes do not need to be in that room. Does everybody read me? You understand what I'm talking about? Everybody else is going to be able to do something, and whether or not they're really able to do it is not the question. But everybody else is going to say they're involved in it, they're having a great time, and you're just going to have to stay away from it because it's not where your heart is. It will lead you in the wrong direction, and you know it. So you need to allow it to die a nasty death while you allow the Spirit of God to give you peace in what He's giving you. Take out, in the middle of that list of the works of the flesh. Take out that list of the works of the Spirit and understand they are at war with one another in you. And if you feed the wrong side of this, you are going to reap what you have sown. It's that simple. So he uses crucifixion. I mean, that's pretty graphic. He says, I literally take these things that I hunger for in my life and I let them die a nasty death. Ha! Chocolate! You will have nothing on me. I will walk past you. I will even smell you. Ha! I will not have you. And I'll use chocolate, but fill in the blank. It could be a lot of other stuff. there's a lot of stuff that we hunger for a whole lot more than food. Affirmation of other people, love of other people, the feeling that we matter to somebody else. And some of us are willing to throw away an awful lot to get that feeling. And you need to know that people that you love and care about are going to love that feeling, and then they're going to end up with nothing. Because they're going to throw away that list of the things of the Spirit. Give themselves that list of the things of the flesh, and the flesh equals death. It doesn't get you what you need. It promises you everything and leaves you broke. It really does. So he says, those who will walk by this rule. What rule? Those who will walk by this rule. Let's structure verse 15 as the disciplined life of the Spirit. And let's say in verse 16 that those who walk according to that, peace and mercy be upon them. Why mercy? What is the word mercy? We've done peace, and we've done love, and we've done joy. What's mercy? Elios. What is the word?
God holding back the punishment.
You're using term and mercy as in God's mercy on somebody, but really Elios is a different idea. It's grace, but a special form of grace. God's mercy is grace in a miserable situation. I always laugh when people say, let's pray for God's journeying mercies, because you're pretty much saying it's going to be miserable. But mercy is grace in a miserable situation. So what he says is, those who walk by this rule, peace and grace amidst a miserable situation, because you're going to be surrounded in a world by people who are calling you to do exactly the opposite of what you should be doing. The fact of the matter is, you're going to be surrounded by undisciplined people who also call themselves Christians. They will do everything to push the work of this flesh in their life, and they will be mystified by the fact that they're not walking in the Spirit. Because they will think that the Spirit is something that they have to feel first and do second. The list that I gave you of the works of the Spirit are things that you can put on and walk with. And the Spirit of God inhabits the things where God is invited. Okay? So at the end of this, he says, if those who walk by this rule, peace and mercy be upon them, and upon the Israel of God. Who is the Israel of God? The term I was looking for was Jewish believers. He's writing to people who have been assaulted by Jews coming from Jerusalem, beating them up. And he's saying, I don't want trouble in the house, and especially among Messianic believers or Jewish believers. Meaning, Jews who are following Jesus, Israel of God. What he's not talking about, and by the way, 2/3 of the church will say, well, that means the church, which is the new Israel. Okay, that's exactly what it doesn't mean. The whole argument here has been between Jews and Gentiles in the book. And he's saying, if there are Jews who are wanting to walk with God through Jesus, through Messiah, I'd like to be at peace with them. Then he ends up by saying, from now on, let no one cause trouble for me. That's the Pauline way of saying, knock it off. Okay? For I bear on my body the brand marks of Jesus. I paid a heavy price for this gospel message, being by grace through faith, atonement law being replaced entirely by justification. Please stop this now. I got the scars on my back, the dents in my head. Let's knock this off. And then he ends with the grace of the Lord Jesus Christ be with your spirit, brethren. Amen.